It's Thursday the 4th of December from the MEN newsroom. This is Channel M's Lunchtime News and these are today's headlines. The Arctic blast continues. Snow shuts most schools in Rochdale, though most of Greater Manchester looks to have missed the very worst of the weather.
Yeah, that's a good thing because, when the younger children, it's slippery, especially in the cold, freezing.
Also this lunchtime, the cancer patient told there was no money for her treatment as health bosses spend thousands on lawyers defending that decision.
I think they are the lowest of the low. I think they don't have a heart, and I think it should not be left up to them. It should be left up to people like my specialist at Christie's, Professor Hawkins.
And forget Dopey, Happy and Doc, Bolton's been forced to rename its Seven Dwarfs.
You've got to be careful you don't use the actual names which are owned by Disney themselves. So they tend to try and get as near to the actual name as they can without saying the name, so they do put their own stamp on it.
Good afternoon. First this lunchtime, 8 inches of snow were predicted this morning in places. There were warnings not to go out on some routes unless absolutely necessary and prepare to get stranded. Now here in Greater Manchester, most areas seem to have escaped the worst of it. In the city centre, it's been more wash out than white out, but there are still some places where some snow has been causing problems. In Rochdale, the council told all its schools there to close. Ben Bland has been to see how the area's coping.
This is one of Rochdale's 92 schools, all of which were advised yesterday by Rochdale Council to stay closed today because of the severe weather warning that was in place and the heavy snowfall that was expected. Now, as you can see, there was some snowfall here overnight, and it was a similar situation in places like Bury and Bolton, about 1 to 2 inches. But nowhere near as much as expected, and as temperatures rose above freezing this morning, much of the snowfall that was predicted has fallen as rain instead. So some schools in Rochdale have actually decided to open, which might make the council's advice yesterday seem a little bit overcautious. But one parent who turned up earlier at this school thinking it was open supported their decision.
Yeah, that's a good thing because, when the younger children, it's slippery, especially in the cold, freezing. Yeah,
does it mean you've had to take a day off work, or has it not affected you very much?
No, not affected much.
Okay, thank you very much. And what's the plan for the rest of the day now for these guys?
Especially in a home.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Nice and warm?
Yeah, nice and warm.
Now, a word of warning. Although the weather conditions are nowhere near as bad as we expected, there is still plenty of snow, ice and sludge around. So if you're out and about on foot, mind how you go. The pavements are quite slippery in places, and on the roads, conditions are still potentially hazardous. And there's another warning to drivers. The police tell us that 20 cars have been stolen across Greater Manchester this week because owners have left the cars running with the keys in the ignition to warm up first thing in the morning. The advice is to use ice scrapers or de-icers instead, and bear in mind that insurance companies for the most part won't cover you if your car's left unattended and is stolen with the keys in the ignition. So that's the situation today. Stay with Channel M News and we'll bring you the full forecast for the rest of the week a little bit later on.
The Bank of England has just announced a cut in interest rates for the second month in a row. They're going down by 1%, putting them at 2%, the lowest level for half a century. It should mean cheaper mortgage repayments for millions of homeowners. But when the bank's bosses announced last month's 1.5% cut, not all lenders passed it on to customers. It's too soon to know whether this cut will get passed on or not. House prices fell faster last month than in October. The country's biggest mortgage lender, the Halifax, says the average home lost more than 16% of its value in the year to November, putting it at just around £164,000, £31,500 lower than a year ago. November's drop was 2.6% and is the biggest fall since 1992. Next this lunchtime, it's been revealed how hospital bosses here in Greater Manchester spent the same amount of money on lawyers defending its right not to give a cancer patient a new drug as it would have cost to prescribe it to her for 6 months. Salford Primary Care Trust's legal bill in the case of Jean Murphy ran to £17,000. She wanted the life-prolonging treatment Sutin, to which the PCT initially refused to provide, even though it then changed its mind.
I think they are the lowest of the low. I think they don't have a heart, And I think it should not be left up to them. It should be left up to people like my specialist at Christie's, Professor Hawkins.
As a primary care trust, their objective is to make people better. But they only have so much money, don't they? The reason they fought this case so strongly and spent all that money is because they were trying to avoid spending money they didn't think was the right thing to do. You get your suit and somebody else doesn't get something else, because there's not a bottomless pit of money in the NHS, is there?
No, there's not. So maybe the wages should be cut down, all the perks. The National Health was brought in by an Iron Bevan, and he said from the cradle to the grave, and that he got that done in 6 months.
Well, this information has only come out thanks to a Freedom of Information request from our sister newspaper, the Salford Advertiser. With me now is the reporter who worked on that story, Pamela Welsh. Pamela, thank you for coming in. First of all, how do you go about getting this sort of information?
Well, the Freedom of Information Act means that anybody, journalists or just members of the public, can access any information that they previously weren't able to get hold of. And legally, Salford Council or PCT or any other public body does have to give you it.
Now, we heard from Jean briefly a moment ago. This must be incredibly difficult for her and the people who followed the case to understand why on earth they would spend this much money on lawyers rather than just the treatment to start with.
Well, they say that the reason why is if everybody who needed or wanted Suitant were to apply for it in Salford, it could cost them up to £3 million in that drug treatment. So they were saying that that would be the best way to save money rather than to waste money.
Now, Jean is now getting the drug that she campaigned for. How much of a difference is it making to her life?
It's making a massive difference to her life. She's up and about, she's healthy, and I think she really appreciates the chance to have this treatment and to prolong her life.
Finally, what are the PCT saying to you now?
Well, they're saying that they still justify their decision to spend the money. They say that this is the reason they had to spend it, to make sure that they're safeguarding their funds for other NHS users. OK,
Pamela, thank you very much for joining us this lunchtime. The Home Secretary has been defending the decision to call in the police to investigate leaks from the Home Office. Jackie Smith again insisted she had no prior knowledge that the Tory immigration spokesman Damien Green was to be arrested over the inquiry. He was questioned for 9 hours last week. She said that in the face of sustained leaks, it was necessary to stop more sensitive material being made public. A European court decided holding DNA samples from people with no criminal record is a breach of their human rights. The ruling means the government may have to remove details belonging to hundreds of thousands of people from a national database. Two Britons have been fighting for a change in the law since their arrests in 2001 in cases which ultimately led to no conviction. Time now to carry on our countdown to Christmas with the 4th entry in our school choir competition. Today it's the turn of G Cross Holy Trinity Primary School in Hyde. Details of how you can vote for them are on the way after we've heard their song Winter Wonderland.
G Cross Holy Trinity School is good because I really enjoy it and I like all the after school clubs that we do.
Well, it's really fun learning here because all the teachers are really nice and all the students are nice as well.
Merry Christmas, everybody, from G Cross Holy Trinity Primary School.
Thank you to everyone at G Cross. If you want to vote for them, you need to text Choir D to 88821. Texts cost 50p plus your normal texting charge. 20p from each goes to charity. The text line closes at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Messages sent after that won't count and may still be charged. You'll be able to vote for them again in our hour-long Christmas choir contest special the weekend of the 13th and 14th of December. The choir with the most votes will win the coveted Christmas choir competition trophy and get to visit our studio at Urbis to perform live. Good luck to everyone who's taking part. Right, time now to take a look at the lunchtime sports headlines. With the details, here's Sam Goodman.
Thank you, James. Well, Manchester United, well, it's just rumoured now that Manchester United star Roy Keane has parted company with Sunderland. The ex-Reds captain had been locked in talks over a new deal, which he'd refused to sign until he was fully happy with the terms. We'll have more on that when we get it. Well, Manchester United striker Carlos Tevez has given Sir Alex Ferguson a selection headache after he scored 4 goals during last night's victory over Blackburn in the Carling Cup. The Argentine has had limited chances this season in Ferguson's side. United are through to the semi-finals after an 8-goal thrill at Old Trafford. Nani scored the Reds' other goal. Benny McCarthy scored 2 for Blackburn, Matt Derbyshire scoring the 3rd. Whilst over at Eastlands, Manchester City drew 0-0 with Paris Saint-Germain. Some of the fringe players were given a chance with the absence of 4 first-team players, but they failed to impress. City striker Darius Vassell was still happy with the point.
We topped our group. We've done well so far in the UEFA Cup and we're looking to go all the way, so there's a chance for some of the players that haven't been playing to get a run out. And I think it's the first time we haven't scored at home, so we're a bit disappointed with that. But we've come away still with a point. We've got to learn to be able to do that this season.
How are the lads? How do you feel the lads are adapting to European football?
Quite well. It's still early yet, but we've done the main thing and qualified, and we just need to look to build on that.
How happy are you to be in the first 11 as well?
Oh, it's always great to start. Any player would say the same thing.
Because obviously you're out with injury for a while as well, and there's not been much gap between coming back and getting straight back into the team, and obviously competition for place is rife at the minute as well.
Yeah, I'd say if any player's injured, as soon as he can get back in the team, he's bound to be overjoyed, so I'm no different.
And the rumours surrounding a £129 million bid yesterday from the Blues has left the club angry. Chairman Gary Cook insists, though, that the club won't be taken for a ride come January. In rugby, Salford City Reds chairman John Wilkinson joined the MEN sports editor Pete Spencer on this morning's breakfast show and had some harsh words for England's performances during the recent Rugby League World Cup. But he began by bringing us the latest on his club's move to their new stadium at Barton.
We're back on track now. We had to restructure the company. Of course, our partners are the City of Salford and Peel Holdings. There was 40 acres of land that was in the old company we had to get back into Peel's ownership, which has now been completed. So we've now got the 100-acre site back. We're working very, very hard now, to bring it together. We know the deadline's 2010, and we'll be on target. Maybe a little later than we thought in 2010, but certainly be there in 2010.
When you get to see these Leeds players, you can perhaps ask them why it was such a debacle in the World Cup in Australia. It was a nonsense, wasn't it? I mean, we were so disappointed that my information is that the Leeds and St Helens players were separate, and that was one of the things that didn't help the team spirit. But what do you put it down to, that horrendous performances?
If I had any influence or anything to do with it now, Peter, I'd start them with singing lessons, because they stand there and half of them can't sing the national anthem. So where's the bonding and where's the players? You see these, Cook Islanders, the Fijians, the Papua New Guinea, they all the shirt to the heart, they all sing. We can't even sing. So, what do we take on the field?
Yeah.
It's the body language, isn't it?
The ECB have confirmed that the entire England side will return to India for the 2-test tour. England will fly out to Abu Dhabi today for a training match before moving on to India next week. The first test in Chennai starts next Thursday. Finally, to finish on a lighter note, Manchester United players have had a high-tech news board installed in the dressing room, letting them know when they're scheduled for a haircut, massage or a pedicure. Well, rumour or not, that would be interesting. Well, that's all the sport from me for now. Join me again later this evening.
Thanks for that. More sport then in the early evening news with Andy Crane from 5 o'clock tonight. Now, before 1 o'clock here on the Lunchtime News, a hospital's being branded insensitive after a family complains about its standard of care. Welcome back to Channel M's Lunchtime News. We've got all Greater Manchester's main headlines for you every day between 12 and 1. And don't forget, you can always go online for more as well, channelm.co.uk. On there right now, the crackdown on people cheating the disabled badge parking system, and pictures as well from the late Tony Wilson being given the freedom of the City of Manchester. That's at channelm.co.uk. Next, she'd just watched her elderly father die a painful death from prostate cancer. Just weeks later, when Sally Guyden from Middleton complained about the care he'd received, she was told the hospital needed his signature to investigate. She was left distraught, as Beverly Walkton now reports.
Now, losing a loved one is tragic enough, but when the hospital where they died doesn't realise that they've passed away, well, that, in your book, is completely insensitive, isn't it? Just tell us what happened in your father's case.
My dad was taken to North Manchester. He was taken in with a diabetic hypo. He was in there 8 weeks and basically he died in hospital of metastatic prostate cancer.
Now, you saw him deteriorate fast, and when he died you wanted to make a complaint to the hospital, didn't you? But they wrote back asking you what?
They wrote back asking if my deceased father could sign a form giving me permission to go into his medical files for legal reasons.
So even though your father had passed away and the hospital presumably knew about it, they were still asking for a signature so that you could make a complaint. How did you react to that?
I was devastated, absolutely devastated, because it's hard enough to lose a loved one, but then to lose them and know that the place where they're supposed to be caring for them have sent me a letter asking if the deceased person could sign it. Obviously they've not read the complaint properly.
What examples can you give in your view that the hospital wasn't looking after him properly?
They'd put cups of tea on his bedside cabinet for him, but my dad was in such pain he couldn't reach up to get the cup of tea. He was unable, because he was so fragile, he was unable to actually pick a cup of tea up and drink it.
Well, the hospital has apologised to this family, although an investigation is underway into why his care wasn't sufficient in this family's view. Back to the studio.
Now, Manchester's Arndale Centre is predicting record numbers of shoppers through its stores today as consumers start realising there really isn't that long to go to get all their Christmas presents bought. But the big question is, how much can they afford to be spending this year with all the economic problems that we've heard so much about? Well, joining me now is Dr. Tom Fawcett from Salford University, who's a psychologist. Tom, thanks very much for coming in. You're predicting that a lot of people are actually in denial this year over the amount of money they can afford to spend, aren't you?
Well, certainly. I mean, it will be different for each individual. But with Christmas coming on, the festive season, people are under pressure in terms of the credit crunch and what they can afford to spend in the festive season. And whether or not it's total denial, where they're totally unaware of it, but semi-denial, where they know what they're doing and spending, it's going to be a difficult phase for them in terms of how they cope.
So if people know deep down that they really haven't got the money, but yet they are still planning on splashing the cash around, why on earth is that?
Well, this is psychologically very interesting in terms of how we think and how we behave, and I think the festive season is steeped in generosity, and people want to give and want to share, but on the other hand, they know the consequences of being in debt, and it's that conflict and tension that creates the psychological, effect of people feeling uncomfortable and basically denying what situation they're in. So they'll take the credit hit until a later stage, and then unfortunately there's negative consequences as a result of that.
And obviously storing up problems for further down the line. If they're spending money they haven't got, it's got to be paid back.
Absolutely. And I think there's a serious need, for a reality check just in the weeks preceding Christmas in terms of, working out what we can afford to spend in terms of the consequences later if we do go on a kind of spending spree at Christmas. But we still have to be generous within our own limits.
OK, thank you very much for coming in and speaking to us about that. Let's hope that it's not too miserable a January for people who do overspend. Now, it's that time of the year when many of us, especially with children, are planning outings to the Panto in Bolton. The production of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is bound to pull in big audiences, but if you're expecting the traditional names for the dwarves, you might just end up disappointed, as Georgia Calvin-Smith now explains.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's my favourite panto of the season, and I can't wait to see Sleepy, Lazy, Grumpy. You know what? It doesn't even matter that I can't remember the Disney names, because in pantomime, dwarves do things their own way. Meet the Bolton boys and girl. Growler, Noisy, Shabby, Lazy, Goody, Sneezer, and Loopy's having a bit of a lie down.
The reason is for the different names is, well, Walt Disney took the Grimm's fairy tale, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but he made his own names up by the Seven Dwarfs. We don't use their names because it's a copyright from Walt Disney, so we make our names up ourselves.
Anyway, what's in a name? A dwarf by any other name is still just as important to the plotline.
A long, long time ago, there was a girl called Snow White who was going to marry a prince, but her stepmother was really, really jealous and tried to have her murdered. It's just such a popular story, and it's like one of the oldest as well, so it's good because you get all different ages wanting to come and see it from when they were younger.
I think once they come in here and the lights go down, the tabs open, the music plays, I don't think the kids are really too worried about what they're actually called, you know what I mean? Because, well, the action, soon as the Magnificent Seven come in, as soon as they come on stage, the place just erupts. And so from then on, the kids soon get into the names that they're called in this production.
Whatever the names on their birth certificates, Seven Dwarfs are essential to the magic of the story. This production of Snow White will be on at the Albert Halls in Bolton until January the 11th. Georgia Calvin-Smith, Channel M News.
Well, let's take a look now at what the weather's got in store and if that deluge of snow is actually going to appear or not. Here's Nikki D.
Taking a look at the weather now, and we were expecting this morning to wake up to lots of frost and a sprinkling of snow after the Met Office issued severe weather warnings for both Manchester and Cheshire. So far, at least in the city centre, we managed to avoid those storms, but there has been plenty of rain. So if you're out and about today, don't forget to take a brolly with you and wrap up warm. You can see there on the map highs of 7 degrees, which is not too bad for this time of year. Moving throughout the morning and this afternoon, rain expected to stay with us. Sprinkling of showers shouldn't be too heavy, and hopefully we'll manage to avoid the frost that has been predicted. Moving later into this evening, again, lots of rain forecast. Outlook for the next couple of days for you there. You can see lows of 0 degrees, so we might get that frost yet that they've predicted. Highs of 10, that's on Sunday. You even see a bit of sunshine there. Let's hope so. I'll believe it when I see it. And Monday, unfortunately, yet more rain.
Channel M's Lunchtime News. Our main headlines this afternoon. The large snowfalls forecast for overnight have largely failed to materialise here in Greater Manchester. But while some areas have been more of a washout rather than a whiteout, there has still been snow in some areas, notably Rochdale, where the council has advised all schools there to close. Figures show Salford Primary Care Trust spent £17,000 defending its decision not to give cancer patient Jean Murphy the life-prolonging drug Sutent. The cash that ended up being paid to lawyers could have actually funded 6 months of treatment on it. The North Manchester Hospital saying sorry for refusing to investigate complaints about the death of a woman's father without providing his signature. Sally Guyden from Manchester thinks medics missed his disease getting worse and didn't give him enough painkillers. We'll have more on those stories in our early evening news later, when we'll also be trying out the latest new winter attraction in the city centre. That's with Andy Crane from 5, but from me and the rest of the Lunchtime team, have a very good afternoon. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye for now.